Hello and welcome to UFC's Inside The Octagon. John Gooden, Dan Hardy, delighted that you are with us. So we're going to be delving deep into the rematch between DC and Rumble, which headlines UFC 210. Their first meeting really had a bit of everything. DC overcame the onslaught from Rumble and was crowned the 205-pound king. They have been on a collision course since that memorable night, and it promises to be another seismic clash.
A rematch for the title.
And a rematch that everybody wants to see. Daniel Cormier is such a complete fighter.
This is life and death. My legacy matters to me.
Anthony Johnson is a terrifying force. He looks like a killer in there.
I promise you, I'm gonna have that UFC championship belt around my waist.
So, Dan, that first fight had so much to look at. I really did. I know we're going to get to it. Let's cue things up with our facts and the stats then. So the champion and challenger, physically, that one will make a difference, right?
Yeah, well, and this one as well. You know, Anthony Johnson's clearly the bigger man, which is surprising considering he's the one that fought at welterweight and is coming up, and DC's the one that was a heavyweight coming down. You know, you would think that obviously DC would be the bigger man, but he's not. The other thing that stands out to me, not only is his experience, but the takedown defence as well at 79%. There's got to be a lot of confidence drawn from that stat because he can stop a lot of takedowns. That's a high stat for this weight class, and with someone with the wrestling pedigree that DC's got, he has to draw confidence from that because he's going to need it.
He's going to be using it,
definitely,
for sure. Now, we actually have another stat page from their first meeting, which tells a very interesting story.
It does. It's all about work rate for Cormier again. Look, he landed more strikes than Rumble threw, which is the first thing that stands out. The second thing that stands out is obviously takedown percentage is very misleading because at 50%, that's only 1 of 2 takedowns, whereas DC was 3 of 8. But I don't think that's a bad stat. That doesn't mean that he's failing at those takedowns because he's a chain wrestler. So he's gone for a takedown, the first one failed, he changed the next one on. Sub-attempts and passes as well, all points towards the game plan, which is to wear Anthony Johnson down, to make him work. Even if you're not forcing that takedown and really trying to get it, if you're moving the legs of Anthony Johnson, shifting him around, forcing him to engage muscles that he really doesn't want to when he's resting, that's all going to pay dividends later in the fight because we know Anthony Johnson, as a power athlete, needs to punch and then recharge that energy bar before he goes again, whereas, as we all know, DC embraced the grind. It's that constant work rate that tends to overcome his opponents.
So you're saying striking, lots of it, wrestling, lots of that.
That's
on
it.
the floor, moving around, sub-attempts, is keeping him guessing.
Lots of everything.
In all areas.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get started by checking out the first fight.
OK, now there's loads to talk about in this one. I'm going to try not to miss anything, but it's a great fight, really interesting. The first thing that stands out is how DC doesn't engage. Watch how he's throwing these jabs. There are 3 jabs that come here, but he'll throw and he'll dip his head back. You can see him almost not really wanting to engage. The jabs aren't even hitting the gloves of Anthony Johnson, which then gives Anthony Johnson the power to throw the big overhand right because he knows DC's not going to close that distance. But this was the downfall for me of Anthony Johnson. The adrenaline dump, the rush, when he saw the fight was in his reach, he started to chase after DC, started to land that clean one-punch knockout that he's known for, and he's straight into the clutches of Cormier. And then this is where the ragdolling starts. And you know, he's a big man to move around as well. There's no doubt about it. But DC's so good at moving these big heavyweights around. I mean, like I said, you know, he's come down from heavyweight. He's used to throwing around bigger guys. And it's one thing that always stands out with DC is how easily he can move people around. Now, the one thing I want to talk about here is the technique in which he uses. It's a very unorthodox single leg. Usually, you'd want to be a bit closer and you'd want to be pressuring down on the knee and on the thigh with your chest and your head. But because he's so far out, obviously trying to avoid this, basically, the big power of Anthony Johnson, because he will swing from anywhere and he has the power to switch you off, even on one leg. So what DC does here, it's a beautiful technique. He's controlling the ankle, as you can see. And as the camera angle changes, you'll see what he does with his left foot. He's going to bring his left foot up and plant it behind the ankle of Anthony Johnson. There, look, planted it. So there's the ankle placed there. The next thing that we're going to look at is this downward pressure that we're seeing from DC. He's driving all of his weight into the knee of Anthony Johnson. You can see he's using his forearm. So he's controlling the ankle, he's keeping the ankle high, but he's driving the leg down, which is forcing the hip to the floor. And also because he's trapping the back leg, there's no re-establishment of balance for Anthony Johnson.
Really nice technique.
Really good work. But this is the thing about a chain wrestler, his ability to put things together and to make it work, to hustle, basically. And the other thing that I want to talk about with DC is once he's got somebody on the floor, usually because he's thrown them and they've crashed onto the floor, he clamps onto them, immediately wraps over, front headlock, cross-body control, whatever you like. Now, in the second round he came out, they started exchanging kicks, and it's clear that Anthony Johnson's the more powerful athlete here as well. He's throwing really powerful kicks, which seemed to get a reaction out of DC. But he made the mistake of throwing one too many, and he finds himself back in a wrestling situation, which is obviously not ideal. And then DC does this. Unbelievable. Picks him up, walks him across. Now watch how he clamps when he lands. Clamps straight onto him, immediately carrying his whole body weight. And now he just starts to iron him out. He starts to spread him across the canvas and force him to work and force him to try and escape positions that he doesn't want to be in, just to get back into the fight. Beautiful wrist control there as well. You can see he's just controlling that one wrist on that side of Anthony Johnson, which can cause him all kinds of problems, because even when he's trying to get up, there's an anchor to the floor that's stopping him. And this also opens up the Kimura attack, which is something else that he uses to, more than anything, in my opinion, just to burn out the shoulders of Anthony Johnson. He's really cranking on this, which is going to tear into the deltoid and really put a lot of stress on that muscle, which will take some of the pop away from his punches. Then you can see Anthony Johnson is wearing, he's taking deep breaths, he's getting cracked with these big elbows, and then you see that. Let's just have a look at that, because it's not always not good to see a reaction from a fighter when they see their cut. And this is a concern when I see it. Look at that. That's an expression of a man that is realising the fight's slipping away from him. He felt like he had his opportunity. He felt like he spent that power in that first round, and now he's finding himself underneath one of the best wrestlers in the sport, trying to get up, and he's already opened up, he's already cut. And when you've got to think, when your oxygen in your blood's low anyway and you're starting to bleed, your body's now starting to recuperate that blood as well, which is another taxation on his energy systems. But the panic is the most important thing, and this is what DC feeds off and has been feeding off in the build-up to this next fight as well. And then after this, I mean, it was basically just he worked him over in this position. He just held him down. He kept chipping away at him. You can see Anthony Johnson's really just starting to come apart at the seams. And as soon as the round's off, DC stands up, walks back to his corner, and look at the laboured effort of Rumble to get back to his feet. He looks bemused. He looks unsure of what he can do now to get back into the fight as he's walking back to his corner. Look at that. Beautiful. It's like a zipper opens up right above his eye. Really nice, short, choppy elbow. Yeah. Very good strike for DC, who is a great top game control. And then here we go again. Now Anthony Johnson, he knows his last-ditch attempt. This is the third round. He throws hard and he slips. Now, this was a mistake that he made, and this was something that a lot of people commented on. Why would he wrestle DC? I'll tell you why. Because the first round, when he threw this punch and he slipped, the first thing that DC did was circle to his back, and then he finds himself carrying DC's weight for the whole fight, for the whole round. Whereas now when he slips here, he lands and he knows DC's wide open. DC's already looking to turn to his back. So you'll see Anthony Johnson pull his right arm out and he just catches the leg of DC. There it is, look. Just to slow him down and stop him taking his back. It doesn't help because he's still in a wrestling situation, and as you see, DC's able to get back to his feet, he reverses him, and then Anthony Johnson's back up against the fence again, looking absolutely exhausted. And this was awesome as well by DC. Look at this lovely knee slide. Really nice work. Let's look at that one more time. So basically, it looks like he's collapsed under Anthony Johnson here. He's dropped to both knees, which is poor posture if you want to lift somebody, because you've got to get back to your feet if you're going to do that. But what he does here, and this is really nice, so he's dropped to his knees here. He's got a double leg situation, but obviously he doesn't want to keep lifting Anthony Johnson because that's going to be exhausting for him. So as he drops to his knees here, beautiful work. Anthony Johnson drops all his weight. You're going to see him lift his right knee and slide his left knee through, which allows him to move himself from underneath Anthony Johnson, and he's on his back again. And then this is where the chipping away starts again. And something he uses really well are these punches, these uppercut punches from underneath. Not a great deal on them. More than anything, they're just very annoying. But when you're in Anthony Johnson's situation and you can't see these punches coming, when they're coming from here, it's lifting his chin up. And that's exactly what opened up the rear naked choke. It's a very strategic approach from DC, and you can tell that he's got a competitor's mindset. He knows how to play the game to open up these opportunities to win. Anthony Johnson's the guy that knows he needs to hit you one time and you'll fall over. So they're very different competitors in their own right.
Really kept Anthony Johnson in a defensive mindset the whole time, with all of that work. Right, well, you guys have reached out to us with some questions. There is a prominent theme to this one. And let me just open this one up. I'm going to go top right over here. It's the big, overwhelming question. What do you think AJ needs to change from the first fight?
It's the big question. It's the question that Anthony Johnson will have been asking as soon as he got back to his dressing room. He will have sat down with the coaches and he would have talked it through. And I would imagine they would have highlighted that massive adrenaline dump, that energy expenditure right in the first round. So what he needs to do is to be more concise with his striking, to not get overexcited and not to chase the finish. So he knows that, I mean, most people who hit him one time and they fall over. But if they don't fall over, then what does he have to do? The fight that stands out to me, and this is probably his best performance for this fight, the best game plan that he went into was against Phil Davis, who's a great wrestler, a really good athlete, who didn't really intimidate Anthony Johnson. There wasn't much of a concern with Johnson in the way he fought. You can tell because when he lands clean shots, when he sees his opponents hurt, he doesn't have that rush forward, that panic to try and get the fight won, which allows him then to focus on his octagon placement, on his takedown defence. And you can see Phil Davis has felt the power of him and he's really trying to avoid it. But look at this beautiful takedown defence here. Slides away, stuffs the head and immediately turns the tables on him again. So if he can keep this calmness of mind, at least in the first round of the DC fight, he may be able to stuff some of those takedowns. And then that forces DC into a striking exchange, which is going to then start wearing on DC because there's a concern there. There's an anxiety that comes with that when you're facing someone that hits that hard.
Okay.
And this was just a very succinct performance. There was nothing wasted. Look at this beautiful strafing that he does. Nice dip into the side, which I think is really useful when you're facing a wrestler because it's much easier to defend a takedown with square hips, in my opinion, because when someone shoots, if they can focus on one leg, you've got to focus on getting that leg back.
Yes. In
a sprawl situation, when your hips are square, they're reaching for both legs and you can start moving away.
They're hitting a wall.
Exactly.
Especially if you're built like Anthony Johnson.
Built like a wall. So, and look how square he's standing. And what you'll see is, as he's moving, he has this nice little dip from one side to the other. There it is, look. He just dips from one side to the other. And because he's planted, he can shift weight quite easily from one side to the other. And because he doesn't need that big wind-up, he can stand square and still hit you and knock you out. So it's nothing to do with technique for Anthony Johnson. He can get away with this. And I think it's quite a useful technique to use against DC. It's all about calmness of mind, though. If he goes in there with DC and thinks, I've got to knock him out with this first punch, otherwise I'm going to end up getting choked out like the last time, the same thing will happen. If he comes in and he's calm and he picks his shots and he thinks, I've cracked him, I've hurt him, he's going to shoot, he's going to take me down, that calmness of mind will surely see him, see a better result for him.
Well, he has been dispatching people in under a minute. I think it's like 5 opponents or something like that. And one thing that he has said recently is, OK, so we learned that DC can take 1 of my shots. Can he take 2 of my shots?
Yeah.
So he's still kind of invested in that power.
But the good thing is that he's thinking past that first shot, whereas a lot of his opponents, because they've fallen at that first punch, he doesn't need to think about another one.
Right.
He knows DC takes that first shot now. So now he's got to think, OK, I've got to land 1 clean shot, but then I've got to then prepare myself to set up for the next shot. And you've also got to think, if he cracks DC 1 time, the first thing DC is going to do is switch to wrestling. So he's got to then think about takedown defence before he thinks about that second shot. But if he's already landed that concussive blow, that's still there. That's still in the bank, and he can still capitalise on that later. He just needs to not get overexcited.
OK. So let's have a look at his power then.
Right. Well, this is what happens if you are able to stuff takedowns against DC. If we find Rumble Johnson on his feet at the end of the first round and picking his shots. Now, this absolute obliteration of Nogueira was really unbelievable to watch, and something that you'll notice. And something that we're seeing quite a lot, we've mentioned it with Derek Brunson as well. Fighters will post one hand and they'll hit with the other. With Brunson, it's the opposite side. He posts with his right hand and he punches with his left. Now, Johnson's got power in both of his hands, but when it comes to the finishing blow, he's always focused on his right hand. And you can see his posture here. He's got one hand placed, so he knows where he's punching, and then he can pitch the other one from a great distance to really gather speed and power. He swings it, he loops it over the top. but it's always that rangefinder. He places so he can punch through. And not only does it allow him to guide his fist to the right target, but it also stifles his opponent's vision.
Okay.
You can see here, not only is Nogueira thinking about the punches that are coming, but he's also got a hand right in his face, so he can't see what's coming. Makes it very difficult, and it allows Anthony Johnson to pick those individual shots. And, I mean, the individual shots that he picked against Nogueira were beautiful to watch. Look at this. Right up through the guard, a very small window that he's looking for. But because he has the time, because he's buying himself a split second with the palm on the face, it allows him to pick these shots. We see it again here. Look at that. You see the hand on the back of his head. So no matter what Gustafsson's doing, no matter where he's moving, he's already trying to overcome that first line of defence of Rumble before he starts even thinking about the offence. And this is something that we see DC doing. When he looks to level change, he doesn't level change straight. He tends to duck in from the sides. So there is a danger that he will level change onto that punch, which obviously is not ideal. And Gustafsson really did everything he could to recover here. But look at that. Look at the wind-up.
Yeah,
it's massive power. And, I mean, he did everything he could to get out of this situation. But when Rumble's on top and he knows that the fight's almost won, he starts to then pick his shots. There's no excitement now. That's strategy. That's a technical approach. But we don't see that until someone is really almost out of the fight.
Okay.
Against Jimmy Manuel, a guy that's also got ridiculous power, he throws a kick and then out of nowhere, a big right hand comes. He was on one leg. He kicks and then comes straight over the top with the power. So he's dangerous everywhere. And then this one against Teixeira was unbelievable. Let's just look at this punch. I mean, look at the angle that it's coming at. He's punching across his opponent. Again, if someone's level changing, if someone's looking to get in on his hips, that is a constant threat. Anything that comes from that direction, we'll see it in the Phil Davis fight as well. As Phil Davis is stepping in, he's looking for that uppercut, that intercepting fist. He didn't really use it in the DC fight the first time around. He landed the overhand right, and that was beautiful. But it very, very underutilised on the uppercut. And I mean, watch the aerial view. You can see how he punches across him, look. Catches the chin and twists his head. It's a really unusual punch, but
brutal. It's
one of those things, kind of like the Robbie Lawler shovel punch. You know, if you've got the power in the hand, it doesn't really matter how you throw it as long as it's placed correctly.
So he's going to use that as a real measuring stick so that he can increase his investment. And with the shorter fighter and that reach, this is going to be a real nice tool for him.
Yeah. And like I said, because DC doesn't really shoot and drive through his opponents...
He's got to find him.
He's got to find him. He's got to get around that hand first.
Okay.
And at the same time as worrying about the hand, there's a nuclear weapon aimed at his head.
It's like E-Honda in Street Fighter.
Exactly.
He's just got to find him there and then just follow up.
There you go.
Let's go back to the socials and let's go here. So, what do we got? What do you think DC's tactic will be first round? Will he try to clinch Rumble early or keep some distance? I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, you can't keep distance from Rumble. You know, if he doesn't feel like there's a line of defence that he's got to work through first, he will continue to push forward and look for that power. You know, the question is, do you run into the power or do you run away from it? If you run away from it, then you're shooting defensively. He's going to be wrestling out of defence because Rumble's pushing forward. And if anything, that was the mistake he made in the first fight, is that he wasn't committing to that jab. He was pulling back, which gave Rumble the confidence to throw that big overhand right. If anything, he's got to crowd him quicker. He's got to neutralise him and immobilise him, put him on the floor and take away that power advantage. I mean, this is something he's very good at. It's something that we've seen him do a lot of times. We've seen him do it against Gustafsson. We've seen him do it against John Jones, two of the best fighters in the division. Yeah. Both taller, both rangier, both very tricky fighters. But he's good at crowding them, cutting the octagon off and forcing them to fight in a phone booth. I mean, look at this. Hand on the back of the head, digging the uppercuts, really big, powerful shots here. And not only is he driving the punch in, but he's also weighing on his opponent, much like he does when he's on the floor. And it's the amount of distance that he forces his opponents to cover as well. Like, he forced them to move back and to run away and to try and create space. And he literally just cut straight across the octagon. This is the best opportunity for me to show you this. So watch this. Let me just pause that. So you'll have to excuse my drawing skills for just a second. So let's go blue for Gustafsson. So Gustafsson started here and he went all the way around here. He did a big circle and he finds himself back in the centre of the octagon. DC went around here and then straight back at his opponent. So you can see the amount of distance covered by both fighters, and you've got to think if Rumble's the guy that tries to conserve energy so he can punch you with full power, he doesn't want to be doing laps of the octagon. He doesn't want to be chased around the octagon. And this is where DC is very good, closing that distance, getting inside your comfort zone, getting inside your personal space, and then roughing you up, grinding, pushing you, forcing you to fight a dirty fight, which Rumble doesn't want to do. Rumble wants to keep distance so he can strike with power and strike when he chooses to. DC forces you to fight when you don't want to, and that's how he's going to beat Rumble. And when he gets you backed up against the fence, we know he's got power. We were sitting octagon side, here we are, Johnny G's. Like, beautiful work against Patrick Cummins, and this is the best thing about this fight for me, is as he's raining down the power punches, he's also got the mindset and the subconscious thought to control his hip as well. Look at the hand on the back hip. We've spoke about this before. I know it's a little blurred, but you get the point. He's controlling that back hip, which basically, it forces Cummins to make a decision. He can either guard his head or he can base out. There are two options. And if he's guarding his head, if you bump him forward, he's either going to land on his face or he's going to base out, which then opens up those shots. Again, it's a very tactical approach. He pulls him forward and continues to strike when there's no guard there. He knows how to manipulate people's balance, and this is why he's so effective when the fight hits the floor, is because he can move around people so seamlessly, and because wrestling is such second nature to him, he doesn't have to think about it. He can think about the new things that he's added to his game, the neck attacks, the strikes, because the wrestling's second nature. He'll bump you onto your head and then hit you, but he's not thinking about the bump, he's thinking about how to strike you. And that's the benefit in that pedigree of wrestling that he has.
He's just going to want to keep it that dirty boxing the whole way through.
Close as possible.
And one thing that we were talking about before we got into the studio was just how strong he is. Doesn't look like he's a specimen, but just arm strength and body. And we saw there, when he's gripping on for the dirty boxing, these guys were wanting to pull away, but he keeps them there.
Yeah, it's very strange. It's very unusual, the power that he's got and the strength that he has. I mean, the Henderson fight, first and foremost, stands out because Henderson's a great wrestler. You know, Henderson, you would think, would be able to at least expect some of this stuff to come, but look how he pitches him through the air. We'll take a look at this, because this is a good example of how he commits 100% to these takedowns, how he knows how to strip the base away from an opponent and use the strength and momentum that he's got to basically throw them in a real dramatic fashion. Like, look at this. Look how this transitions. So similar to the takedown that he used against Rumble, he'll place his foot behind his base. Look how he moves his left foot and it goes behind the leg. There, look. You can see now he's hooked. What he's also going to do, you can see he's got the right underhook as well. He's going to lift with that, which is going to take some of the weight off Hendo's base, which allows him then to lift with the knee. I'll play this through slow so you can appreciate it. So as he's driving forward, watch the right underhook lift and lifts with the left knee. Look at the left knee.
Such great awareness of where these people are on his body. He's feeling.
Exactly.
It's like the cat's feet. The senses are everywhere, but they're all over his legs as well.
That's it. I mean, look at that. Like, you pointed this out, John. He's literally on the side of his big toe there. That's 100% commitment to that takedown. That shows how much belief he's got. And he's got the underhook, so he's driving, but he's also got the overhook on the other arm, which means he knows that Hendo's not going to base out. There's no base to be had there because he's taken everyone away.
Bad landing.
It's an awful landing, especially when you've got DC landing on top of you. And the thing that happens, same again. As soon as he lands, clamps onto him. Look at that, clamps. Locks him down, doesn't let him move, doesn't allow that fight, that wriggle, that scramble. He stops it immediately. And that's the best time to do it, when someone's already flustered from the takedown. We see it here again, look. He steps in, a massive lift here, huge lift, 360 in the air, and slams him.
And rarely see that.
Very rarely. And then the leg trip as well. I won't go through that again because we've broke that down before, but same again, he clamps onto his opponent straight away. And one more time with Gustafsson, lifts him and clamps him. Now watch. Gustafsson, this is early on in the fight. Gustafsson's still got a lot of fight in him here. He's still making an effort to get out of this situation. But you can just see how DC's leaning everything on him. So as he's fighting, as he's working, DC's just holding on to him, making him carry his weight. You can see Gus is kicking and kicking and kicking. And as soon as there's an opportunity, he circles to his back, to his preferred side, locks him down in side control, and then starts to think about attacking the Kimura grip. And if we watch here, you can see the minute details that make this so beautiful. So he's lifting him here. Now watch how he switches his hands. So he knows he's going here. So he's lifted him. His right hand's in the air. He knows Gustafsson's going to land on his back. So now he can, with confidence, move that hand. And as he moves it, he's going to bring it down right onto his forearm.
Give me a break, dude.
Right? It's a forearm smash. Lands on him with the forearm. And then, obviously, Gustafsson, he's disorientated from the throw. He's just been cracked with the forearm. And now he's got to fight out of a pin with one of the best wrestlers in the division on top of him. It's exhausting. It's really exhausting work. And when you find yourself in this position, you know you've got a good couple of minutes of work just to get back to a 50-50 shot. And with Hendo, he wasn't able to keep DC off. You know, the work rate, the strength and the size of him in comparison just allowed him to wear him down. You know, he opened up the rear naked choke again and took it, and a credit to Hendo, he toughed it out, stayed in there as long as he could. But when DC knows he's got that squeeze, he's not even on the back properly, he'll just squeeze, and all that body pressure and that weight on top of him, he's very good at spreading his weight and just ironing people out on the canvas. One
thing that you said to me, Dan, was he's doing this to people that are so high level. They're not letting him do this. He's just imposing his will, which makes it so impressive. Another question from Twitter then, Ruthless UFC. Which fighter do you think has evolved the most since their last fight? Well, we know that Rumble's been on an absolute tear. So he's doing great things. But, well, I had an interesting conversation with DC, and we spoke about this. And this has been very public. He said it in interviews. He wants to beat Rumble. He wants to beat John Jones. Then he wants to beat John Jones again. So really, he's probably looking at 3 fights. I mean, he's 38. You know, he's towards the end of his career. He wants to be a champion, and he's done that. Now, to beat John Jones twice would really seal him as the UFC light heavyweight champion, because there's still that doubt, because he has that loss on his record. So the conversation that I had with DC, he basically talked about the fact that the skills that he has now are the ones that will see him through to the end of his career. So his training camps are about refining and improving and conditioning. He's not adding anything new to his game. He's sharpening things up, he's increasing his conditioning, and he's getting his timing back. And because it's not broke, it worked the first time against Rumble, he can go in and try and do the same thing again. He can make minor improvements, of course, but there's nothing major that he has to add to his game. Whereas Rumble has a lot of things coming out of that first fight that he needs to add to his game. Now, DC has said that the biggest gap between them is the mental side.
Yes.
How much do you believe in that?
I totally believe it, 100%. And I think that DC...
Can he work on this? Can AJ get that back?
Well, I think he can. I mean, there's always a question in Rumble's mind, and that's based on his cardio, based on the fact that he knows that if he hits somebody, he'll knock them out. But if he hits somebody and he doesn't knock them out, then he's got to deal with the cardio issues because he does slow down. I mean, he's got a huge amount of muscle mass. And when he throws with the amount of power that he does, you've got to think that his body recruits every single muscle. You know, all those motor neurons are firing at the same time, which is a massive taxation on his cardiovascular system. So the confidence for Rumble going into this next fight has to come from the training camp. It has to come from being prepared to fight hard, and being prepared to pace yourself and to pick your shots and not think you can start him in a round, because he tried that and it didn't work. So a lot more questions were asked about Rumble than DC. I think DC can say, I have the tools to beat him, I just need to refine them and prepare them. Whereas Rumble needs to tweak some things and make some changes, and he's doing that, definitely.
Well, he's proved it in the Octagon since their last meeting. Let's see if he can do it again.
Definitely.
What a fight.
Awesome.
Unbelievable stuff. Well, that is your headliner to 210. And as you would expect from us here at Inside The Octagon, we have another episode coming your way, and it is between 2 of the top middleweight contenders. Riding a 4-fight win streak, Gegard Mousasi looks to continue his push towards a title shot against former middleweight champion Chris Weidman. The All-American desperately needs a win to stay in contention, but faces a tough task against a determined Mousasi, riding a huge wave of momentum towards his first shot at UFC Gold. Well, that is a big one for sure for the middleweight picture. We look forward to you joining us for that one. Thanks to everyone that got involved on the socials. Keep the conversation going using the hashtag Inside The Octagon. That's a wrap from us. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.